She came to the frontier to bring peace, but when she met the Apache chief known as the Cold One, everything changed. His gaze wasn't just cold, it was a test, a challenge, and a warning. What happened next would alter both their destinies forever. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from, and why you're following this. The Arizona Territory, 1876. Dust swirled across the parched landscape as Sarah Montgomery stepped off the stagecoach in the frontier town of Willow Creek. Her boots hit the dirt with determination. Dark blonde hair pulled back tightly beneath a practical hat. At 25, she'd traveled alone from Boston to this desolate outpost with a singular purpose: to establish a trading post that would serve as both a business and a means to foster better relations between settlers and the Apache. "Ma'am, you sure you're at the right stop?" The stagecoach driver scratched his beard, concern etched in the lines of his weathered face. "Ain't much here for a lady such as yourself." Sarah straightened her travel-worn skirt and lifted her chin. "I'm exactly where I need to be, Mr. Hayes. My father's letter described this location perfectly." The mention of her father brought a familiar ache. Colonel James Montgomery had spent years attempting to broker peace between the U.S. Army and various tribes before a fever took him 6 months prior. Among his papers, Sarah had found correspondence about his work with a respected Apache leader, known to the whites as Chief Stoneface, a man her father believed was key to establishing lasting peace in the territory. "Suit yourself," Hayes muttered, tossing down her trunk. "Hotel's yonder, such as it is." Sarah surveyed the dusty main street with its handful of wooden structures, a general store, saloon, blacksmith, and the small hotel with peeling paint. This wasn't Boston with its cobblestone streets and brick buildings, but something about the raw openness of the land stirred something in her. Inside the hotel, the proprietor's wife, Martha Wilson, showed her to a small but clean room. "Not many women travel alone to these parts," she remarked, curiosity evident in her voice. "I've come to continue my father's work," Sarah replied, placing her father's journal on the simple wooden desk. "Colonel Montgomery." Recognition flashed in Martha's eyes. "The Indian negotiator? I heard he passed. My condolences." "Thank you. He believed peace was possible here, and I intend to prove him right." After Martha left, Sarah opened her father's journal, fingers tracing his familiar handwriting. One passage stood out. "Stoneface is unlike any leader I've encountered. His gaze is as cold as winter, but there is wisdom there, and a desire for his people to survive these changing times. If there is to be peace, it will come through understanding him." The next morning, Sarah visited the general store to inquire about purchasing the small abandoned trading post on the edge of town. The storekeeper, Edward Simmons, laughed outright. "A trading post? Run by a woman? That's Apache territory, miss. They come through sometimes to trade, but they don't take kindly to settlers pushing boundaries." "I'm not pushing boundaries, Mr. Simmons. I'm creating a bridge," Sarah replied evenly. "My father taught me their language and customs. I understand the complexities of trade with the tribes." "Your funeral," Simmons shrugged. "Old man Jenkins owns the place. Hasn't used it in years. Cabin's probably still standing, though." By afternoon, Sarah had negotiated purchase of the trading post. As she inspected her new property, a sturdy log structure with a stone chimney situated near a small creek, Sheriff Thomas Miller rode up, his expression grim. "Miss Montgomery, word travels fast in small towns. I understand your intentions, but I strongly advise against this venture." He gestured to the distant mountains. "Chief Stoneface's band camps in those hills. They've been peaceful lately, but that could change in an instant." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Sheriff Miller, I appreciate your concern, but my father believed cooperation was possible, and I share that belief. The colonel was a good man, but even he trod carefully. Stoneface isn't called the Cold One without reason. His stare alone has made hardened soldiers look away." "Then it's fortunate I'm not a soldier," Sarah replied. "I'm a businesswoman proposing a mutually beneficial arrangement." As the sheriff rode away, Sarah felt a prickle on the back of her neck. Turning toward the tree line, she caught a glimpse of movement, a shadow slipping between the pines. Someone had been watching. That night, as she prepared the trading post for reopening, arranging trade goods and cleaning years of dust. Sarah heard the distinctive sound of hoofbeats. Moving cautiously to the window, she saw 3 Apache riders approaching in the moonlight, their faces painted for war. Sarah's heart hammered, but she straightened her spine and moved to the door. This was what she had come for, her first test. She stepped onto the porch, keeping her hands visible, and spoke in the Apache language her father had taught her. I welcome visitors to this place of peaceful trade. I am Sarah, daughter of Colonel Montgomery. The lead rider's eyes narrowed at hearing his language from her lips. His face remained impassive as stone as he studied her. Sarah felt the weight of his gaze like physical pressure, understanding immediately why he was called the Cold One. This was Chief Stoneface himself. The silence stretched between them, taut as a bowstring. Chief Stoneface remained mounted, his obsidian eyes revealing nothing as he considered Sarah's words. The 2 warriors flanking him shifted restlessly, hands near their weapons. Daughter of Montgomery, Stoneface finally spoke, his voice deep and measured. Your father was a man who spoke with 1 tongue, not 2. Why does his daughter come to this place? Sarah maintained eye contact despite the intensity of his gaze. To honor his work and continue what he began, this trading post will deal fairly with your people. A flicker of something, perhaps interest, perhaps skepticism, crossed the chief's face. Words are like wind, they pass and are forgotten. Then judge me by my actions, Sarah replied. My father believed our peoples could find common ground. I share that belief. Stoneface dismounted in one fluid motion, his moccasins silent on the dirt. He stood nearly a head taller than Sarah, his presence commanding. Up close, she could see the lines of wisdom etched around his eyes, belying his reputation for merciless dealing. The white man's idea of fair trade has often meant taking everything and leaving nothing, he said. Why should you be different? Because I come alone, seeking neither land nor gold, Sarah answered. Only honest exchange and understanding. The chief's penetrating gaze seemed to search her very soul. Then, unexpectedly, he nodded. We will watch. We will wait. We will see if the daughter is like the father. With that, he turned and remounted his horse. Before riding away, he added, The mountains have eyes, Sarah Montgomery. Remember this. Then they were gone, melting into the darkness like apparitions. Sarah released the breath she'd been holding, her hands trembling slightly with the aftermath of tension. Their encounter had been brief, but she felt as though she'd been through a trial by fire. The following days were busy as Sarah prepared the trading post. She scrubbed floors, repaired shelves, and arranged her goods. Coffee, sugar, flour, tobacco, cloth, and tools. Items she knew would be valuable to both settlers and Apache. She'd also brought items specifically for trade with the tribes. Quality knives, mirrors, brass bells, and colorful beads. Word of her enterprise spread quickly. Curious settlers began stopping by, some supportive, others openly skeptical or hostile. You're playing with fire, miss, warned Jeremiah Foster, a rancher whose property bordered Apache hunting grounds. Stoneface may seem reasonable one day and raid your livestock the next. That hasn't been my experience, Mr. Foster, Sarah replied calmly. Perhaps if trade were conducted fairly and consistently, there would be less need for raiding. Foster's face reddened. My brother was killed by Apaches 3 years ago. They understand nothing but force. I'm sorry for your loss, Sarah said sincerely. But this cycle of violence serves neither side. My father documented instances where misunderstandings led to bloodshed that could have been avoided. Women, Foster spat as he left. Too soft-hearted to see danger until it's too late. Not all visitors were antagonistic. Martha Wilson brought fresh bread and practical advice about desert living. Sheriff Miller provided information about local dynamics. And to Sarah's surprise, a young Apache woman named Morning Star appeared one day, silently helping her organize trade goods. Why do you assist me? Sarah asked in the Apache language. Morning Star arranged a stack of calico cloth before answering. My father speaks of your father with respect. I am curious about his daughter who speaks our tongue. Your father? He who you call Stoneface. I am his youngest daughter. Sarah nearly dropped the tin of coffee she was holding. The chief is your father? Morning Star smiled slightly. He sent me to watch you, to learn your heart. He does not trust easily. but he remembers Colonel Montgomery's fair dealing. Over the next 2 weeks, a tentative routine developed. Morningstar visited daily, teaching Sarah about Apache customs and needs while Sarah taught her English writing. Gradually, Apache traders began to appear, cautious at first, then more regularly, as word spread of fair prices and respectful treatment. Sarah kept meticulous records, noting which items were most valued and learning the particular needs of each season. She recorded everything in a journal similar to her father's, capturing observations about customs and practices that might foster better understanding. Then came the incident that tested everything she'd built. A group of cowboys rode into town, led by Foster's son William, a hot-headed young man known for his contempt toward Indians. They'd been drinking heavily at the saloon when they spotted 2 Apache men trading at Sarah's post. "Look here, boys, the Indian lovers got customers," William shouted, dismounting unsteadily. Sarah stepped onto the porch. "Mr. Foster, my clients and I are conducting business. Please continue on your way." "Clients? They're savages who'd as soon scalp you as look at you," William slurred, his hand hovering near his pistol. The 2 Apache men tensed, hands moving toward their knives. Sarah stepped between the groups, heart racing but voice steady. "There will be no trouble here. This is a place of peaceful trade." "Peace?" William laughed harshly. "Tell that to my uncle's ghost." He drew his pistol, aiming at one of the Apache men. Before he could fire, Sheriff Miller's voice cut through the tension. "Drop it, Foster. You're drunk and making a fool of yourself." The sheriff had appeared from the direction of town, rifle aimed squarely at William. After a tense moment, William lowered his weapon. "This ain't over," he muttered, glaring at Sarah. "People in town are talking, saying you've forgotten which side you're on." After the cowboys departed, Sarah thanked the sheriff, who shook his head grimly. "I can't always be riding out here in time, Miss Montgomery. Foster's boy has a following among the younger men. They're itching for trouble." That evening, as darkness fell, Sarah was startled by a knock at her door. Opening it cautiously, she found Chief Stoneface standing alone, unarmed, his face solemn in the lantern light. "I have heard of what happened today," he said without preamble. "My daughter says you stood between your people and mine." "Violence serves no one," Sarah replied, inviting him inside with a gesture. The chief entered, his tall frame seeming to fill the small cabin. His eyes took in every detail: the neatly arranged trade goods, the journals on her desk, the photograph of her father. "Your actions were brave, perhaps foolish," he said finally, "but they speak louder than words." He turned his penetrating gaze on her. "Yet I must know your true purpose here, Sarah Montgomery. Few white women come alone to such places without reason." Sarah met his gaze unflinchingly. "My purpose is exactly what I've stated: to create understanding where there has been mistrust, to trade fairly where there has been exploitation." "And what do you gain from this?" Sarah hesitated, then decided on complete honesty. "I gain purpose. My father believed in this work, and through it I feel connected to him still. But more than that, I believe it is right." Stoneface studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded slowly. "Tomorrow you will come to our camp. There is something you should see." Dawn painted the eastern sky with streaks of gold and crimson as Sarah prepared for the journey. She wore her most practical riding clothes, sturdy trousers beneath her split skirt, a gesture of both practicality and respect for the distance they would travel. Morningstar arrived as arranged, bringing a gentle mare for Sarah to ride. "My father rarely invites outsiders to our camp," Morningstar said as they mounted. "This is an honor not given lightly." Sarah nodded, understanding the significance. "I'll remember that." They rode through winding canyons and across open stretches of desert, the landscape transforming as they climbed higher into the foothills. Sarah marveled at the rugged beauty: red rock formations jutting against the sky, hardy desert plants blooming improbably from seemingly barren soil. Morningstar named plants and landmarks in her language, teaching Sarah words beyond what her father had recorded. "Your father spent time in our camp," Morningstar said as they paused to rest the horses. "He learned our ways, shared meals with our elders, but that was before the soldiers came to build the new fort." Sarah frowned. "What fort?" "My father didn't mention this in his journals. It came after his last visit. The The Bluecoats build where our ancestors are buried. My father protested, but they did not listen. Morning Star's voice held controlled anger. Your father wrote letters, trying to stop it. Then he fell ill. This new information troubled Sarah deeply. Had her father's efforts been undermined by the very government he served? Was this why his letters had grown increasingly frustrated before his death? By midday, they approached the Apache camp, positioned strategically in a protected valley with clear views of approaching riders. Sarah felt eyes watching as they rode in, women pausing in their work, children staring curiously, warriors evaluating the potential threat she represented. Chief Stoneface waited at the center of the camp. Standing beside him was an elderly man, his face deeply lined, leaning on a gnarled walking stick. This is Wise Owl, Stoneface introduced, as Sarah dismounted. He was keeper of our stories when your father visited. He asked to see the daughter who follows her father's path. The old man studied Sarah, then smiled, revealing few remaining teeth. You have his eyes, he said in halting English. Good eyes, seeing eyes. Sarah bowed her head respectfully. Thank you for welcoming me. Stoneface gestured toward a nearby ridge. Come, there is something you must understand. As they walked, the chief's demeanor remained formal, but he spoke more openly than before. Your trading post sits on the edge of two worlds, Sarah Montgomery. To understand why this matters, you must see with clear eyes. They climbed a winding path to a promontory overlooking the valley. From this vantage point, Sarah could see the Apache camp nestled below, but as she turned to look eastward, she gasped. In the distance, unmistakable against the landscape, was a military fort under construction. Even from here, she could see soldiers drilling, supply wagons arriving, the foundations of what would clearly become a permanent installation. Fort Davis, Stoneface said, his voice flat, named for a general who never set foot on this land. They built it on our ancestors' burial ground, despite your father's protests. Sarah felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. I had no knowledge of this. My father's last letters mentioned tensions, but not this specific cause. The army says it will protect settlers and maintain peace, Stoneface continued, his tone making clear his opinion of these claims. But its cannons face our hunting grounds, not the town. This is why you allowed me to establish the trading post, Sarah realized aloud. You're testing whether I'm truly my father's daughter or just another settler encroaching on your land. The chief turned to face her directly, his penetrating gaze as intense as their first meeting. Your father earned my trust. He understood our ways, respected our boundaries. When the fort plans came, he fought his own people for what was right. His expression hardened. Then he died, and we thought his words died with him. Until I arrived, Sarah murmured. Until you arrived, Stoneface confirmed, speaking our language, offering fair trade, standing between my warriors and angry young white men. A hint of something like respect colored his voice. Actions that echo your father's. Sarah looked again at the fort, then back to the Apache camp. The contrast couldn't be clearer, the military precision of the former against the organic harmony of the latter with its surrounding landscape. What happens now? She asked. The fort construction continues. Tensions will only increase. That, said Stoneface, depends partly on you. They descended in thoughtful silence. Back in camp, Sarah was invited to share a meal with the chief's family. The atmosphere was initially guarded, but as Evening Shadow, Stoneface's wife, asked practical questions about trade goods, and children gradually overcame their shyness to peek at the visitor, the tension eased slightly. After the meal, Wise Owl approached, carrying a bundle wrapped in soft leather. Your father left this, he said, offering it to Sarah, for safekeeping. Now it should return to his daughter. Sarah unwrapped the bundle with trembling fingers. Inside was her father's military journal, not the personal one she had, but his official record. She opened it to find detailed documentation of agreements made with the Apache, maps marking sacred sites and hunting grounds, and most significantly, his formal protests against the fort's location. He gave this to you for protection, she realized. Wise Owl nodded. He feared some would make his words disappear. White leaders sometimes forget what they promise when the ink dries. Sarah closed the journal, holding it tightly. I'll ensure these agreements are honored. As afternoon waned, Sarah prepared to return to her trading post. Stoneface accompanied her and Morning Star to the edge of the camp. "What you have seen today is not for many white eyes," he said. "What will you do with this knowledge, Sarah Montgomery?" Sarah met his gaze directly. "I'll continue my father's work, not just trading fairly, but advocating for the agreements he made to be honored. The fort's location violates those agreements. Words from a woman trader may not carry weight with army men," Stoneface observed. "Perhaps not," Sarah acknowledged. "But my father had colleagues in Washington who respected him. I have his documentation, and I have something he didn't. A successful trading post demonstrating that cooperation benefits everyone." For the first time, she saw something like approval in the chief's normally impassive expression. "Your path will not be easy," he warned. "There are those among both our peoples who prefer conflict to understanding." "I'm aware," Sarah replied, thinking of William Foster and his friends. "But difficult paths are often the only ones worth taking." As they rode back, the setting sun casting long shadows across the landscape, Morning Star asked, "Are you afraid, Sarah Montgomery?" Sarah considered the question honestly. "Yes," she admitted. "I'm afraid of failing, of making things worse instead of better. But I'm more afraid of not trying." When they reached the trading post at dusk, Sarah was alarmed to see several horses tethered outside and lamplight glowing from within. Morning Star tensed, but Sarah recognized Sheriff Miller's mount among them. Inside, she found the sheriff, Martha Wilson, and Edward Simmons from the general store, all looking grave. "Miss Montgomery," Sheriff Miller began, relief evident in his voice. "We were concerned. Word spread that you'd ridden off with Stoneface's daughter. I was invited to their camp," Sarah explained, still clutching her father's journal. "It was an opportunity to build trust." "That's not how some see it," Simmons said grimly. "Foster's been in the saloon all afternoon talking about how you're conspiring with savages. Some men are listening." Martha stepped forward. "We came to warn you. It might be best if you stayed in town tonight." Sarah straightened her shoulders. "This is my home and business. I won't be driven from it by gossip and threats." "It's more than gossip," the sheriff countered. "Army officers from the new fort were in town today. They're not pleased about your trading with the Apache. Say it complicates their position." "Their position?" Sarah felt anger rising. "Their position is on sacred burial grounds contrary to agreements my father negotiated." She placed the journal on her table. "Agreements documented right here." The three exchanged glances. "That may be," Sheriff Miller said carefully, "but challenging the U.S. Army isn't advisable, especially for a woman alone?" Sarah finished. "Perhaps that's precisely why I must do it, because my father would have, had he lived." After they departed, the sheriff reluctantly leaving only after Sarah insisted, she sat alone with her father's journal, reading by lamplight. The documentation was meticulous, including signed agreements acknowledging the sacred nature of the land where the fort now stood. A soft knock interrupted her reading. Cautiously opening the door, Sarah found Morning Star had returned. "I told my father of the men at your trading post," she explained. "He sent warriors to watch from the hills tonight. You will not be alone." Sarah felt a complex mix of emotions, gratitude, determination, and a growing sense that she stood at a pivotal moment, not just in her own life, but in the relations between two peoples whose futures were inextricably linked. "Thank you," she said simply. As Morning Star slipped away into the darkness, Sarah returned to the journal, more determined than ever to honor her father's work and forge a path toward the understanding he had sought. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight at least she was not alone. Morning arrived with an unusual stillness. Sarah rose early, reviewing her father's journal once more before securing it in a hidden compartment beneath a floorboard, a precaution that now seemed prudent. As she prepared the trading post for the day's business, her mind worked through possibilities. The journal provided leverage, but using it required careful strategy. Her first customers arrived mid-morning. Two Apache women bringing intricately woven baskets to trade for cloth and needles. Sarah conducted business as usual, but noticed their glances toward the hills, where, invisible to casual observation, she knew warriors kept watch. Shortly before noon, the atmosphere shifted. The sound of approaching horses preceded the arrival of 3 army officers, their blue uniforms pristine despite the dusty ride. Behind them rode William Foster and several of his companions, smirking as they dismounted. Sarah stepped onto the porch, spine straight, face composed. "Gentlemen, welcome to Montgomery Trading Post." The lead officer, a captain by his insignia, removed his hat with practiced courtesy. "Miss Montgomery, I'm Captain James Harrington, recently assigned to Fort Davis. These are Lieutenants Phillips and Warren." Sarah acknowledged them with a nod. "What brings Army officers to my establishment, Captain?" "Information has reached us that you've been engaging in significant trade with the Apache," Harrington said, his tone neutral but his eyes sharp. "Even visiting their camp." "That's correct," Sarah confirmed, "just as my father did before me. You may be unaware, Miss Montgomery, but the Army has concerns about certain items being traded to hostile tribes, particularly ammunition or weapons." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "My inventory records are open for inspection, Captain. You'll find no ammunition or weapons among my trade goods, and I wasn't aware that the Apache under Chief Stoneface were classified as hostile. They've maintained peace for 3 years. Harrington's expression tightened slightly. "Peace is a relative term, Miss Montgomery. We've had reports of their warriors observing fort construction. Intelligence suggests they're displeased with our presence." "On that matter," Sarah said carefully, "I've recently come into possession of my father's official records, documenting agreements made with the Apache. Those documents clearly designate the land where your fort stands as sacred burial ground, not to be disturbed." The captain's polite facade slipped momentarily. Colonel Montgomery's agreements were provisional, pending final approval from the War Department. "The signatures of 2 generals on these documents suggest otherwise," Sarah countered. Lieutenant Phillips stepped forward. "Miss Montgomery, surely you understand the strategic importance of the fort's location. It commands the valley and provides protection for settlers." "At the cost of breaking trust?" Sarah asked. "My father believed lasting peace couldn't be built on broken promises." William Foster, who had been listening with increasing agitation, spat in the dust. "Peace with savages? Your father was a fool and you're following in his footsteps." "That's enough, Foster," Captain Harrington snapped, then turned back to Sarah. "Miss Montgomery, I'm not unsympathetic to your position, but military necessity takes precedence. The fort will remain where it is." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Then we disagree, Captain, but that doesn't mean we can't find compromise." "What sort of compromise?" Harrington asked, curiosity tempering his official stance. "My father's documents include maps of the burial grounds. The fort currently encroaches on the most sacred section. If construction were adjusted to avoid that specific area, it might address the Apache's primary concern while still allowing you your strategic position." The captain studied her thoughtfully. "You seem very certain of Apache thinking, Miss Montgomery." "I listened to them, Captain. Something too rarely done." Before Harrington could respond, a commotion arose as Stoneface and 4 warriors rode into view, approaching at a deliberate pace. The soldiers tensed, hands moving to their sidearms. "Hold!" Harrington ordered his men, though his own posture stiffened. Stoneface reined his horse to a stop, his impassive gaze taking in the scene. The nervous soldiers, the hostile settlers, and Sarah standing her ground on the porch. "Chief Stoneface," Sarah greeted him in English, then continued in Apache, explaining the officer's presence. Stoneface nodded once, then addressed Captain Harrington directly in measured English. "You build on bones of my ancestors. This is not the way to begin new friendship." Harrington, to his credit, did not dismiss the chief's words. "Your concerns have been brought to my attention today. Perhaps there is room for discussion." An unexpected voice joined the conversation as Sheriff Miller rode up. "Gentleman and lady," he added with a nod to Sarah. "Quite a gathering you've got here." "Sheriff," Harrington acknowledged. "We're discussing matters of security and trade." "And burial grounds," Sarah added pointedly. Miller dismounted, positioning himself carefully between the groups. "Miss Montgomery has established a successful trading post that's reduced tensions in this area. Chief Stoneface has kept his warriors peaceful despite provocations." He glanced meaningfully at Foster. "Seems to me that's worth building upon, not tearing down." The next hour unfolded in what Sarah would later recognize as a turning point. Captain Harrington, revealing himself more pragmatic than she'd initially judged, requested to see her father's documentation. Stoneface, maintaining his dignity but showing unexpected flexibility, agreed to consider a modified fort boundary that would preserve the most sacred sections of burial ground. William Foster and his friends departed in disgust when it became clear Harrington was seriously negotiating, muttering threats that the sheriff calmly noted. By mid-afternoon, the outline of an agreement had taken shape, one that would require approval from higher authorities, but which Harrington seemed genuinely committed to pursuing. As the various parties prepared to depart, Harrington approached Sarah privately. "Your father's reputation preceded him, Miss Montgomery. I see now that his daughter is cut from the same cloth. Not many would stand their ground as you did today." "I simply believed in his work," Sarah replied, "and in the possibility that different peoples can find common ground, if they try." "A commendable belief," the captain said, though often challenged by reality. "Reality is what we make it, Captain," Sarah countered. "Today proves that." After the officers departed, Stoneface remained, sitting with Sarah on the porch as the sun began its westward descent. "You spoke with strong words today," he observed. The soldier chief listened. "He's a reasonable man," Sarah said. "Unlike some." Stoneface nodded. "There are those among my people who also prefer war to words. They will not be pleased with compromise." "Will you face opposition?" Sarah asked. "Leadership always faces opposition," Stoneface replied, a rare hint of weariness in his voice. "But I have lived long enough to see what war brings. If peace can be maintained without sacrificing honor, I will choose this path." He turned his penetrating gaze on her. "When you first came, I thought you were like other white women, afraid of the land, afraid of my people. But your eyes did not waver when mine met them. You have proven stronger than I expected." "I was afraid," Sarah admitted. "But my father taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it." Stoneface nodded slowly. "A wise teaching." He rose to leave, then paused. "The trading post stands between two worlds, Sarah Montgomery. As do you. This is an important place now." In the weeks that followed, Sarah's trading post became exactly that, a place between worlds. Captain Harrington, true to his word, adjusted the fort's construction to preserve the most sacred areas of the burial ground. Stoneface, honoring his part of the agreement, established regular trading patterns that brought his people to Sarah's post rather than the town, reducing friction with hostile settlers. The compromise satisfied no one completely, which Sarah came to recognize as the hallmark of a fair agreement. William Foster and his supporters continued their grumbling, but found less sympathy as the benefits of peaceful trade became apparent. Some of the younger Apache warriors questioned Stoneface's decision, but respected his authority and wisdom. One evening, as autumn painted the landscape in golds and reds, Morningstar visited Sarah with a gift, a beautifully crafted necklace of turquoise and silver. "My father says you have earned a place in our stories," she explained. "The woman whose trading post builds bridges instead of walls." Sarah accepted the gift with deep gratitude. "I only continued what my father began." "And made it your own," Morningstar corrected. Many feared when the colonel died his words would be forgotten. "You have given them new life." Later that night, Sarah wrote in her journal, not her father's but her own, which had grown thick with observations and reflections. She documented the day's events, the progress of negotiations, the small victories and ongoing challenges. As she wrote, she realized how much had changed since her arrival months earlier. She had come seeking purpose through her father's legacy, but had found her own path, her own strength. The trade